sewing friends, it's Carolina Moore, your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, and today I'm hanging out with my little Baby Lock Jubilant, and we're going to talk about leader ender quilts. The Baby Lock Jubilant is an awesome machine, but like most machines, when you end a seam, you end up having a thread tail. So a great way to avoid a thread tail is what's called a leader ender, and in the process, you can actually make an entirely second quilt called a leader ender quilt, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So let's get started. I have the Jubilant here, and I have this sewing project that I've been working on with some pieces. So I have these two pieces, and I'm going to sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just going to put it under the machine. And I'm going to sew. Now, normally if I wanted to take this off to go ahead and add my other piece on here, I would have to lift up my needle, lift up my presser foot, pull it away, and cut the thread, which would leave a thread tail behind, and that thread tail is what would start my next seam. Instead, and you'll already see on here, I already have a leader ender piece sitting on here that I can trim off. So I can trim this one off. I'm going to grab some little squares from my basket right here and put them right sides together, and I'm going to put these through the sewing machine, and those will hold my spot. And now I can cut the piece that I was working on off the back. And I can go ahead and sew this other piece on. And over time, I will have, instead of all these thread tails and all these threads, I end up having all these little pairs of squares. And these pairs of squares, at some point, instead of sewing squares together, I can sew these pairs together to make 4 patches. And when I started this, I started out with some 1/4 square triangle pieces and 1/2 square triangle pieces as well. So not all of my squares are just squares. They started out as 1/2 square and 1/4 square triangle pieces. So they end up turning into bigger 4-patch and 4-patch units with scrappy bits on them. And then I'll be able to sew these into rows. And then eventually I'll be able to sew these rows together to make a whole quilt. And then I'll have this fabulous, scrappy, fun quilt made out of all kinds of leftover little pieces that I just made in between working on the actual projects that I was working on. So those are leader enders, and they prevent you from having all kinds of thread tails when you're working on your sewing projects. I hope you enjoyed this video on leader enders. Please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Let me know if you've ever done a leader ender project or if you're planning on doing one now. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I have so much more fun quilting planned, and I can't wait to share it with you. Bye for now.